The Hills Have Eyes remake was released in 2006, and this one was directed by Alexandre Aja, which I've usually always pronounced it Aja. I don't know why, but I've always said Alexander Aja, and everybody else says Alexander Aja, so I don't know exactly how to pronounce it precisely, but this is the guy responsible for directing High Tension, the French extreme film. I think that's how it goes by, and you can tell, and I'll be getting into that very much so. But you can definitely tell that this feels and this is presented like an Alexander Aja film to a T, which is a good thing, especially if you like your brutality and your gore and everything that you would expect if you are familiar with High Tension kind of things. So I think this is a brilliant remake. On upon this watch, I will dare say that I do think this is a better adaptation than the original The Hills Have Eyes, just by a bit, just by a half star. And Russ Craven's the master, and he proved himself extremely well when it came to A Nightmare on Elm Street, and I think that's where he succeeded at the absolute best, because I've watched a few more of his films and I gave a lot of his other films like rewatches and stuff like that, and he doesn't have like a flawless record when it comes to cinema, but he definitely scored when it came to A Nightmare on Elm Street, because he's going to go down in history specifically for that, and Scream too. So he kind of created two franchises, and you got to give credit where credit is due for that alone. It doesn't even matter what he's done when it comes to The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 or Shocker, which I recently watched, which I couldn't even finish. I'm not even kidding. The movie's terrible, but that's just my opinion. But he'll definitely be known, just like John Carpenter will be known for Halloween, and Sean S. Cunningham will be known for Friday, even though they didn't really necessarily continue with the franchise. But anyway, we're talking about Alexander Aja's remake, and like I said, I really like it. There's a lot in this film that surpasses the original in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to brutality and horror. Like, this film is absolutely horror centric. So we open up the film already with a more intense sequence than the original film. We've got this like pickaxe situation where one of the monsters is just slamming this pickaxe on somebody and bringing it right back up and bringing the entire person with it. Like, it's fantastic. So fantastic. And then he's dragging a bunch of bodies with these chains, and just the color palettes and everything looks so like grim and hot at the same time, very desert like, which the first film, the original film, you can feel the heat in it too, but this one just feels so grimy and dirty and like sickening in a way. The way they portray like the heat of the desert in this film, more than the first one, I think, or more than the original, I think. And then we have the opening credits, which I love. I love the direction that they took this. They play this like 1950s style oldies song, like country western song. And did I write down the guy's name who did that song? Yeah, Webb Pierce. Because I did look him up and I looked more of his music. And I dig that stuff. Every once in a while I'll get into a mood where I feel like listening to that kind of music. So Webb Pierce does the opening track for this film. Then they start showing, and this is going to go right back to my disgust and hatred for anything mutant and deformed. I've talked about it in my Funhouse review that I had to stop the movie, and I was not expecting that two-headed cow scene, and from what I understand, that's an actual cow with actually two heads. I don't do that shit. I don't do that shit at all. And there's a lot about this opening that made me cringe when they start. The worst one was the two-faced baby. But it wasn't so bad. Like, I didn't like have to leave the room or anything like that. Mostly it's just like, people with like warts and growths on their body. It's not necessarily like multiple armed people but anything deformed animals, anything deformed people, I don't do. It was pretty tame in the opening, so I'll give it that, and it didn't make me, like I said, it didn't make my skin crawl too much, which it usually does. But I do give mad props to the way they handled the opening, or the way Alexandre Aja handled the opening, where you see the nuclear test and then you just see flashes of these mutant people. And I think they're real too, because like that's the collateral damage of nuclear testing is, you know, people being born fucked up kind of thing. So then we're introduced to our family. I like how Ted Levine plays the dad. Blanked on his name there. And he portrays him really well. I like how he's like the father from the first film, but he's, I guess, more modern and I don't know. They're hard to describe because the father in the first film was certainly more like conservative, racist, like the bad kind of right wing person, and this one just seemed very like very much like a cop, but not as shitty, I guess, of a human being. He seemed more down to earth, more like a family man type guy. But with the family in this one, and I'll say with the family in the first one too. Well, this one even more so. This family just seems like they have a shit ton of problems. Like this family seems dysfunctional in a lot of ways, and it's subtle. Like, not to harp on them too much because they don't seem like bad people or anything like that, but you just get these vibes with like the way the daughter behaves and the way the son behaves. They almost seem estranged to each other, like they're kind of like taking this vacation just for the sake of trying to be a family, even though they really don't have a lot in common. And the mom is like, you know, super kind and conservative and religious, and the daughter just has this like total rebellious nature against the entire thing. Like she like almost refuses to pray when the mom wants to pray and bless everybody in this, like when they get into the accident and everything, and the daughter's just being a total bitch about it. And the son kind of just, I don't know, he seems kind of aloof, which is typical for a kid his age and everything. But even like the characters played by or the characters Doug and Lynn, again from the first film, the ones that are having the child, they seem a little bit aloof with each other too. Like it's just this subtle vibe, like I said. But in this film specifically, it felt the family specifically felt just a tad more dysfunctional than the family did in the first film. But that's just a small vibe I got from it. It doesn't really mean much at the end of the day kind of thing. So we're in New Mexico this time. I'm pretty sure the last film took place in Nevada, if I'm not mistaken. Might be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure it was not New Mexico in the last film. So a little change of scenery, although it's still a desert in the same way. We got California Dreamin' playing in this movie. Always a very popular needle drop when it comes to like all American cinema kind of thing. And it fits in this film. I liked how they did that. The gas station attendee before they get into the accident is total stereotypical 2000s movie. Like this is the guy that you see at every gas station giving directions in every horror movie in the 2000s, even earlier too. But like he's the trope gas station guy, like to a T. They got the pure tropey gas station guy like crazy. So funny. So if you watch the first film, this film like does play out in the same way when it comes to the plot, when it comes to the invasion of the trailer by Pluto and Jupiter. They look very different. Pluto actually looks like a mutant, actually looks like a monster, where with Michael Berryman in the first film, the actor, he had some like birth defects, and I don't think he grew hair at all, but he still looked like a human. Like he didn't look, Michael Berryman doesn't look like a monster. So they kind of definitely used a lot of exploitation when it came to him in the first film, because I don't think they gave him too much makeup, but he still looks pretty human. Like he looks human. He looks like he doesn't look like a mutant, which they were going for, and that's what they were trying to portray with this guy. But in this one, he's full of makeup. Like it's purely prosthetics. Like he looks like a monster. He can't even speak. His teeth are all fucked up. And same with Jupiter. Like Jupiter's teeth are completely messed up, and Jupiter's scary in this one. And he's not even a big guy. He's just threatening with his psychoticness kind of thing, which is even more scary than size. And like I said, everything plays out the same plot-wise, but everything is more enhanced in this one. The father's burning to death on the post or whatever they tie him to, way more brutal. The flames are CGI, but they're well done CGI. But just the suffering that you watch this guy go through. I mean, if you can only imagine what it would be like to burn to death. I'm pretty sure everybody thinks about it every once in a while, how much pain that could possibly be in. I hope that you would lose consciousness quite fast if you were in that situation. I would hope to God anyway. But yeah, in the film, he's just burning to death and suffering like crazy. The rape is way more intense and way more exploitive and way more detailed in this one. But again, Alexandre Aja, you can see the French extreme. I don't know if it's French extreme new wave, but I know it's French extreme. There was a bunch of films that were released in France that were brutal. Like they focused on the brutality, and you can see he came right off of that into this. Like it's purely his style. The like everything involving the family's deaths is intense. You have the scene with Lynn where one of the cannibals or the mutants starts to breastfeed off of her, and she's just sitting there and taking it while this guy is breastfeeding off this woman because she's breastfeeding for her kid. So he, you know, goes to town on her nipples and then shoots her, and then there's a scene where Lynn gives this like one last breath. Somehow she's still alive after being shot in the head. And she takes one last breath in her husband's arms before she dies. You have the mom too, who watched her husband burn to death and then basically like borderline went catatonic. And she stopped kind of realizing where she was and what's going on. She grabs a rock to try to defend the trailer where these two mutants are in, and she tries to go behind one of them, but he notices her and shoots her right in the chest, and she just flies to the wall. At one point, she's in a total, I guess, hallucinatory state, or in a state where she just stops realizing what's going on, and the character Doug is trying to comfort the mom, and the mom is like, she thinks everything's fine. She's like talking about, are the kids in bed? Is everybody asleep? She's saying she's cold. It's really depressing. Like, it's really fucked up. The way this film was directed, way more depressing and way more disturbing, like deeply disturbing than the first film was. The parakeet scene is worse, like with the blood on his face. There's a worse scene involving the baby. There's a scene where one of the mutants holds a gun to the baby's head. Like, this is not a faint of heart film. Like, this is purely horrific. This is not an introduction to horror kind of film. You don't want to watch this if you're not used to horror. Like, it is just brutal. And they just crank everything to level 10 when it comes to the plot of the way the first film goes. And then I like the third act of the film, because the third act of the film certainly portrays Doug much more heroically, and I like the character arc of Doug that he took in this film compared to the first one, because in the first one he's very, like, for lack of a better word, pussy. He's kind of a pussy. He's kind of a bitch in the first one, but he doesn't really grow from there as much as he does in this film, because in this film he really snaps when he has the walkie-talkie and they kidnap the little baby whose name is Catherine, and then one of the mutants puts the walkie-talkie to the baby's mouth to like she's crying, and so Doug can hear her voice, and this is the part where he snaps, and then he finally goes hunts the mutants down and just totally becomes a badass. And I like that a lot. And this film also introduces like a bigger third act compared to the first film. You've got the introduction to mines, because these mutants, before they were mutants, were miners, and they would mine, and eventually they went to hide in the mines when all this nuclear testing was being done by the American government or whatever. And this is what turned them into mutants, because they never wanted to leave their towns, their villages, so they went to hide in the mines, and they just basically refused to leave, kind of thing, and turned into these mutant cannibalistic fucking monsters. So you get a lot of scenes in the mines, and I like that. And in the third act too, you have this complete abandoned village that looks like a nuclear testing village. You got dummies on swings and like mannequins everywhere, and it looks like a location that they would use to do nuclear testings, and it's just creepy, like max level creepy kind of thing. And the mutants that they introduce at the end, like this guy with his ballooned brain just hanging on the chair, and the way he talks, and this little girl who has like a growth coming out of her like cheek and everything. It's creepy and it's disturbing. And going back to the beginning, like, I hate like deformed shit. If it's makeup and prosthetics, I don't care, because it's makeup and prosthetics. You can tell that it's fake. But when it's real shit, like they did in fucking Funhouse, it makes my skin crawl. Like it makes like it's I guess it'd be the equivalent of somebody being afraid of like spiders or snakes or something like that, which I'm not. So I don't know what that feeling is, but I think it would be the same feeling if I had to guess. It would feel like the feeling I get when I see like a two-headed giraffe or whatever. Not for me. And then I like the climax where they blow up the trailer again, except this time they do it a little bit differently. They don't necessarily lure the guy to the trailer like a trap. He happens to come through the window, and then the kid is able to tie his hands up, like on some kind of on the windowsill or something like that, so he can't escape. And then they end up putting matches on the bottom of the door and opening up the gas cans and canisters so that when like they escape the trailer through the window, but when the mutant comes into the trailer and opens the door, the matches all of a sudden swipe on the floor and light and ignites the whole trailer. So that was cool for a little change of pace, but I liked how they kept it, in vein of the first film, but also kept it violent at the same time. In this village too, with Doug when he finds all the mutant people, I love when he like gets knocked out by somebody and he wakes up in this locker, and this locker is filled with body parts and there's just gore everywhere. Very hardcore stuff. Again, Alexandre Aja loves doing that shit and he knows how to do it very well. I like how Ruby sacrifices herself in this one. In the last movie she survived, but in this one she basically attacks Jupiter off the cliff, and sacrifices her own life, which is sad. I mean, I wish she could like push him off the cliff, but survive somehow by landing on top of his body or something like that, or be rescued by Doug. That would have been better, but killing her off just adds to the brutality, so I can't take away anything from that. It didn't ruin anything. Like, I like when movies have the balls to do stuff like that. And then the final shot I find really cool, where you see the guy, somebody, you don't see his face, but somebody's holding binoculars and seeing Doug and the baby Catherine and Brenda and what's the other kid's name? Bobby, yeah, Bobby. Blanking on names. And you see somebody or something looking through binoculars at them, and that's how the movie ends. So cool way to end it off. I like that. There's a really cool shotgun suicide done by the gas station attendant when Big Bob goes to visit the gas station or go find help at the gas station, where Buddy's in the like porta potty or whatever, and he blasts himself in the head. Beautiful practical effects. I mean, maybe beautiful is the wrong word. Horrific practical effects, but well done is what I mean, clearly. But yeah, this is a fucking great remake. This is how you do a remake. And, you're like, don't come into this movie expecting a Wes Craven film, because you're not going to get one. You're going to get an Alexandre Aja film. And if it's too much for you, well, that's probably a sign to do your research and look at other films that the director has done before, because that's the only way you're going to get an idea of what kind of film you're about to get into, kind of thing. And you're about to get into a gore fest when it comes to anything by Alexandre Aja. If you've seen High Tension, expect that kind of thing. So, I loved it. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5, and I gave the original a 4 out of 5, and I think this is one hell of a remake. So, nothing but props to this one, and I think the gore is spectacular, and it's exactly what a horror picture should be, but this is not introduction to horror, like I said. So view at your own discretion, but I love it. Subscribe to Martin Film Fan if you like to listen to my voice, or if you like my film reviews. I'll be back with more soon, so stay tuned for those. Check out what's on the channel already. Stay tuned for what's coming. Until next review, have a good one, take care, and cheers.